Okay, quick welcome to everybody. Hopefully, you're seeing my shared screen of our future teacher reborn page 2024 to 2026. This will be the page where you followed the link to register for today's session. And as I scroll down here, you'll see that session title and the registration form. But what we always put now is early bird booking links for the upcoming sessions before the full details are available. So you can click that link, it will open the registration form and you can register in advance of the fuller details being available. As I scroll down here, also what becomes live just before we start the session is the presenter panel that has the welcome tab and then the names of each of the presenters and then the what next actions and so on. And all the previous sessions and recordings are further down the page. The recordings for today's session will be probably available early next week, if not sooner. So I'll stop sharing my screen and hand over to the next person.
Okay, so our first speaker, Emma Cliffe from Bath. Very welcome. I was very excited that we managed to get someone talking about something quite uniquely intersectional, supporting neurodivergent students in maths and statistics. So over to Emma to introduce herself.
We can't hear you at the moment, Emma. You may be muted.
Can you see my screen?
We can see it. It's all perfect
Good.
now. Yeah, and we can hear you.
Excellent. And has that now gone full screen?
Yep.
Excellent. I can't see anybody else at the moment. I don't know what I'm doing on Zoom, but I'll just press on and hope. Okay. So I'm Emma Cliffe. I'm from the University of Bath, and I work in maths support. And as part of that, we take referrals for students who are at risk of non-progression, and it's some of those students that I'm going to be remembering as I present here. I know that for many of you, you won't have the opportunity to work one-to-one with a student and tailor to them. But I'm hoping that by sharing some of the things I do, some of the things I'm thinking about, it might give you ideas which might be relevant to your practice. So I'm going to introduce three students. They're based on students I've worked with, some of them quite a long time ago, just to keep them anonymous. I'll give a short introduction to their experiences, an overview of what I was thinking about when I'm working with them and students like them, and then some practical examples of the things that I mean by those, which are not supposed to be exhaustive in any sense. So some experiences some students might have. So Joe was an engineer. He had A at A-level maths, and but he was referred and he said, I'm having real problems with maths. The other modules have good workbooks. So there was something about the organization of the maths module which presented issues for him. Now, Joe's neurocognitive profile, he had superior high average skills in that profile, but also much weaker working memory, processing speed, word recognition, and his handwriting was particularly difficult to read and slow, and he couldn't often read his handwriting back. We have Mary, who is a mathematician. So Mary had double A-level maths, A star A, but 5 weeks into her first year, after being referred, she said, I feel so stupid. Maths is what I've always been good at, and now I can't understand any of it. Her kind of profile, she had superior and high average skills there. Her working memory was superior, but her processing and her word recognition was relatively much weaker, and her writing speed was quite slow, although it was legible and coherent. And then we have Nat, a sports scientist. So Nat was referred again during her first year. The disability advisor said she's having significant problems with her maths module. Nat had a level 3 BTEC in sports and exercise science, like about a third of the people on her course did. And she did have GCSE maths with a grade 4 in today's kind of parlance, but she had had a maths tutor throughout school. And that obviously was a long time ago at that point as well. Her neurocognitive profile as measured by the EdPsych was fairly typical, but a dyscalculia screener suggested substantive difficulties with comparing relative sizes of numbers and with concepts and inferences about operations on numbers or the relationships between them. And she had a very loose understanding of time. So with those students in mind, here are some of the things that I'm thinking about when I'm working with one of those students. Now, this might be in the moment where we run a drop-in. I might be working with a student and I'll be thinking about all of these things, but not really knowing that much about that student. Or it might be like these 3 students, Joe, Mary, and Nat, where I was working with them over a period of time building skills and strategies. But in the moment, I'm thinking about a multi-sensory approach, but with consistent use of color and images, and particularly consistently linking symbol, word, and process as part of that. I'm thinking about breaking problems down into small, manageable steps. I'm reading maths aloud. I'm encouraging the student to think aloud and acting as a scribe where that's needed as well, so they can concentrate perhaps on their superior verbal skills and I can get down what they're saying. Use visualizations, concrete examples, concrete objects, flowcharts to connect to a concrete example, a process, and concept maps to highlight relationships and connections between the abstract, but also between the abstract and the concrete. I'll be encouraging the student themselves to use multisensory approaches, encouraging overlearning, whether that's repeatedly doing similar maths examples or using index cards to kind of store concepts and repeatedly go back to them. I'm explicitly encouraging metacognition, a reflection on how their problem solving is going and what's happening in that problem solving. I will bring working memory overload to the students' awareness. They're often not aware of why they're feeling frustrated and confused, and it's because they've overloaded their working memory. And unless they're aware of that, they can't do anything about it. So that's an important thing a tutor would be doing. And then finding approaches with that student to reduce the workload on working memory. Block out information not in use, break up large sections of text, and ensure that the student can do things like change the font color, have content read aloud if that helps, and experiment with the student with different ways of capturing thought process and writing workup. When I'm concentrating on building strategies, the kind of thing I'm preparing to work with on those students, depending on the student's own needs, is note-taking in maths. So that might range from actually physically note-taking on paper through to having full notes provided for them, but how to structure annotation of those in class. I will be looking to build strategies where to deal with that expanding symbol range of vocabulary, which kind of balloons once we're in first year mathematics and engineering after A-level. A focus on how to build rich concept images connected to examples. So when a student meets a word, they've got a visualization, an example, and non-examples in mind. Connecting and mapping how concepts relate to each other and visualization and how the student might do that. Active reading skills explicitly taught, including things like self-explanation skills. Problem classification. So before we just try and dive in and then get stuck and not know why, can we pause and try and classify the problem, connect it to other problems, and therefore start to structure problem-solving activities. The development of the internal monitor. So that's the thing when you're doing maths, which is going, hang about, something's going wrong here. The development of that internal voice and raising the metacognition around that. Building processes, approaches for processes, so diagrams and overlearning, and mathematical writing skills as appropriate to the student's degree and the level they're working at. So let's look at some examples of what I mean by those things. So for both Joe and Mary, who had difficulties with writing, having full notes provided beforehand of the mathematical content was extremely important. Mary could take correct notes, but not in a time constraint. Her actual notes had all kinds of errors, and they would start to mathematically make no sense, which is why she was really thinking she didn't understand anything, whereas Joe couldn't read back his own notes. So those full notes needed to be in a format they could access, they could annotate, and that could be read aloud. What I mean by structured color is using color to link the part of a formula with the word that it is that bit of the formula, and then perhaps then we're part of the process where we're doing something. And so color can be used to help process. And we might use color in a structured way throughout a whole course. So for Joe, when studying a transform between time and frequency domain, everything in the time domain was in green, everything in the frequency domain was in pink. I remember that quite well. And that helps with processing. Mary enjoyed creating handwritten things. This isn't Mary's own handwriting. It is a reproduction in my own handwriting, but she enjoyed making cards which collated a concept, brought in a visualization, brought in examples and non-examples, and then used color in a structured way to connect the aspects of those things. And those lived in her bag. She carried them around with her at all times and were complete by the time we got to revision. For Nat, concrete things were really important. This is just what I found in my room the day I took the photo many years ago. What's not photographed here is the balls, the meter sticks, the clocks. For Nat and I, sports and exercise science is an active thing. So we were actually doing things, including timing me running, which was not great. But so we were having concrete experiences and then doing maths around them. Other forms of concrete things might include visualization. Now, this might be something that you could put in front of a class. So the difference between what something looks like when it's on the real line and what something might look like when it is on the, can I even get this correct? There we go. So what the visualization should look like depending on the change in one symbol. I'm having trouble moving slide on. There we go. Flow diagrams that you can hide parts of. So a student might use the flow diagram there to guide what they're doing to start off with. A flow diagram they've made themselves, but then being able to hide parts of it and then try and take a step. And if they can't, expose the next step. Concept mapping was really important to Mary. Again, this isn't her own handwriting, it's a reproduction. And the color here is the different types of information, definitions, theorems, and axioms. Concept mapping for Joe wasn't something he did himself, but a tutor might do as he's speaking and exploring. And we can also make these things perhaps for a wider audience as well. Overlearning, we can obviously use textbooks and things for that, but we can also create things which can be used by a whole class where we can just repeatedly say, I'd like another one like this, please, and another one, and another one, and another one. For Mary, she was aware that her processing speed was slower, and so she tried to rush when reading. And so one important thing that I did with Mary was to slow her reading down by teaching her self-explanation for proof. And that actually dramatically slows reading down. It's necessary to read proofs slowly, but because she was trying to rush because she felt the pressure from benchmarking against other students, she wasn't forming self-explanations, and that wasn't emerging as an implicit skill like it might do for other students. And so that was an explicitly taught but general skill that other students might acquire on their own, perhaps with the same rapidity. And when we're talking about metacognition, we might have a verbal discussion. Again, this is a discussion that was had with Mary, and then we're trying to capture that discussion in a way that makes sense to the student. So this is an example of that idea of what do I do when I'm stuck? How can I start to structure my problem solving when I'm trying to prove something? And then for Joe, for instance, he would use the laptop all the way through school, but not for maths. But because he thought you had to click and point to create maths, had never explored that, he was taught to type maths. He could already touch type, he had great keyboard skills. And so he learned to type mathematics, maths that he could read, that other people could read. And that's actually how he took his exams in the end. So that was a kind of very quick breeze through of some of the things that I will be thinking about and working with on a student as I'm building strategies. But this is very much tailored to what the student is bringing and looking to produce that with the student. Ideally, that metacognition is driving everything because we want them to start to produce their own strategies, things that work for them, which are taking those superior and high average skills and using those in a powerful way to avoid getting caught up in the things which are causing them more difficulty and making that not the whole story. I haven't heard a second bell from Alistair, but I am going to stop
That's
there.
just because you've been so efficient that you're actually a minute ahead of the second bell.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's excellent. Loads of things in the text chat. I think lots of people also wanting to know more about different things. So I'll leave that now. I think Lillian, I think you're going to introduce our next speakers.
Yes, I'm going to hand the mic over to Tamlyn, my colleague, and Angharad, our student, and then I'll pop in right at the end of their session to talk about the Distractables. But over to you, Tamlyn and Angharad.
Thank you. Sorry, I was trying to find the unmute button. Hi, everyone. My name's Tamlyn. I'm with the Inclusive Education team here at the University of York, one of the Inclusive Education Advisors. I work predominantly with the science faculty, but in terms of different projects, like my neurodiversity project, I work across campus. I'm here today with Angharad. Angharad, do you want to say hello?
Hello, I'm Angharad. I'm an MBio student here at the University of York, studying biology, and I was one of Tamlyn's interns on this project.
Thank you. So in the inclusive education team, one of our key principles and values is working with student partners. We do strongly believe that if we're going to make any change whatsoever in education, we really do need to listen to the students and try to refrain from making assumptions about their experiences. So one of the ways that we do that is we engage with student partners across all of our projects in lots of different ways. But today I'm going to talk to you about the Neurodiversity project and how we employed student interns for that. So just get my slides to move on. There we go. So the Neurodiversity project came as a growing recognition of neurodivergent students and their intersecting identities. So my background up until a couple of years ago was with academic skills development. I worked in an academic skills team. I worked quite a lot in our writing centre and also as a study coach working one-to-one with students. And I was seeing an increasing number of students coming through looking for ADHD support. I have myself an ADHD diagnosis and a very, very, very recent diagnosis of autism as well. But I was starting to see with students that they very much felt as if they didn't quite get the support that they were looking for. They had their student support plans in place and they could speak to their supervisors, etc. But there was just something not quite getting to the depths that they needed. Also, we have a growing number of students coming through to the university who are on enrolment ticking that box of having some form of neurodiversity, but we're also seeing students who think that they might have some form of neurodiversity, but I'm not sure. And there's students who probably haven't got to that stage yet of wondering whether they have, whether it's a dyslexia or anything like that. So they don't yet identify as neurodivergent. And for me, the space that I work in is around student outcomes and student success. So we're kind of exploring the role that neurodiversity might play in some of the gaps that we're experiencing as well with student outcomes. We're also aware that neurodivergence often co-occurs with additional challenges that affect learning, and therefore they're more likely to take a leave of absence. So there are extra challenges that might happen for a student whilst they're at university. Okay, so to tackle and to start working on a neurodiversity project as part of our inclusive pedagogy work, somebody said, we've got some funding for student interns. So I was right on it straight away to formulate a plan for employing a couple of interns for the neurodiversity project, because it really couldn't have happened without them. When we recruited student interns, we didn't limit it to students who were neurodivergent. We weren't allowed to do that anyway. So we did say we wanted some form of lived experience, whether that was themselves or through supporting family members, etc. And then we chose Angharad and our other intern called Robin, who has since left the university and gone on to other things. But we were going to focus on inclusive practice, where we were going to put together resources for our academic staff. But the resources are obviously going to be grounded in the lived experiences of the interns and the students that the interns were going to talk to. Angharad's going to talk to you about all that in a moment. And we were going to put together some resources for a neurodiversity toolkit and also a staff workshop. It was really important for us to co-create those resources, and there was a process involved in obviously the groundwork for that. But I'm going to hand over to Angharad, and she's going to tell you about her experience.
So overall, I had a extremely positive experience working with Tamlyn and Robin. It was really lovely to get to work with a neurodivergent adult and a neurodivergent peer, and we kind of all worked really well together because we kind of understood each other on that level. So that was brilliant. And some of the kind of main task that we did throughout our internship was a survey gathering students' opinions, neurodivergent students' opinions on how they could be better supported in their learning and their university experience. And that was also a brilliant experience for Robin and I to kind of understand where other students were finding difficulties and issues, and kind of not feel alone in those. We also did thematic coding of the answers to our survey, which was a great experience for me, especially because I hadn't done any sort of qualitative data analysis. I do a lot of quantitative number data analysis in my degree. It was also a really positive experience in meeting others in the inclusive education team and also in other teams who were also neurodivergent and kind of building careers for themselves in accessibility that worked with their neurodivergencies. So that was brilliant. And then we also created an end of internship recommendations report. And that was a really satisfying experience to kind of be able to compile everything we'd discussed throughout our internship into one document and have some kind of tangible recommendations for the university going forward to help support neurodivergent students. And another highlight was we also got really involved with Neurodiversity Celebration Week. So we helped look over resources that the university was going to be sending out for Neurodiversity Celebration Week and give our input on kind of content and language and potentially activities and events that could be put on. And we also spoke on a panel with some neurodivergent staff at the university, speaking about our experience being neurodivergent in university. And so that was also a brilliant experience. The next slide, there we go. So our survey was called What I Wish My Lecturers Knew About Studying with Neurodivergence. And Robin and I had a really good time kind of trying to phrase the questions in ways that neurodivergent students would kind of engage with and understand. And we got lots of responses that really made us feel seen, and we kind of realized that any struggles we had, we were kind of not alone in them. And so that was a really validating experience that kind of gave us more power to then suggest changes within the university. So we had lots of different suggestions. A really common one was neurodivergent students need kind of clear instructions and suggestions, things such as lecture and seminar slides. Having those in advance before the session really helps neurodivergent students to kind of know what to expect going into learning. The fact that the layout of the lecture or seminar room can really impact students' engagement with learning. So, for example, a really crowded, busy room is going to impact a neurodivergent student's engagement in the learning. And also linking back to the fact that clear instructions are needed, that it can take longer to process the same amount of information. So having slides in advance is really helpful. And that was something that was really clearly in our recommendations document. Also, something that came up a lot was kind of isolation in university. So the fact that having kind of peer-to-peer support can often help. Talking to other students about the same module and about the same assessments is really valuable within learning. But neurodivergent students can find it a lot harder to maintain those connections and make them in the first place. So we made lots of suggestions for kind of more community within neurodivergent students within the university. And another thing that came up quite a lot is abstract questions and abstract instructions can be really difficult to interpret. And lecturers kind of need to be able to give support to neurodivergent students without kind of giving the answer away outright, so that neurodivergent students kind of know what's expected of them, but can still go through the process of working out the answer for themselves. So the survey was a kind of really positive experience in kind of gathering feedback from neurodivergent students on what they would like to change, but also feeling validated in ourselves and knowing that we're not struggling alone.
Thanks, Angharad. The survey was a brilliant thing, because we still draw on that now a year later, and I'm always talking about it in the workshop that I do. It's something that I'm hoping somewhere down the line that we can recreate that in some way, or maybe get a more focused, like focus groups or something around those same questions, because it was so rich in data. And that's one of the things that I focus on in the workshop as well, is I share the student voice. It's really key that I'm able to do that. So out of the work that Angharad and Robin did on this survey, it really helped us to fine-tune what was going to go into the workshop. I wanted to make sure that we focused on empathy and understanding and compassion. So I'll just say that the workshops are aimed at academic staff mostly, but I do get some requests for different teams across the university as well. So I've got one coming up with our access and outreach team shortly, and I had one with I've got a request from careers as well. So the people are wanting to know just in general how to work with and best support neurodivergent students across the student experience. But the focus here is on empathy and understanding and compassion. So that's really about we do an exercise around unearthing assumptions and stereotypes, just so we get those surfaced, and so the participants can start challenging themselves a little bit. Some of that at the beginning, and I think Angharad might remember this as well from the very beginning, some of the stereotypes that came up were a bit ouch when we kind of knew that they were out there, but to actually see them written down by people that we work with day in, day out was a little bit of a challenge ourselves, but it was a journey. And then we really do foreground students' emotional states, and I tie emotion to learning. So if a student is feeling emotionally safe, they are more likely to be able to learn and absorb what is happening in the classroom. It's also an opportunity for our staff, very, very busy staff, to connect with their peers, their colleagues, to share good practice in focused discussion. And I learn quite a lot from facilitating these workshops, because I hear about some of the things that people try out in their classes, and then their colleagues say, oh, I haven't tried that, I'm going to try that myself. So it is about sharing practice, really. We do a longer activity where, because scenarios are always very useful. This is where I present about 4 or 5 scenarios. I try to tailor these to the academic context. So whether that's in the sciences, it might be around lab work, or if it's more student support about one-to-ones and things like that. And this is really so we can highlight the lived experience of neurodiversity in the classroom or elsewhere. So this might be about a student who has come to see their supervisor about missing deadlines and things like that. And we talk about how that student might be feeling. And we talk quite a lot about in depth about the students' emotions and some of the support that they might need as well. But also we talk about what might be going on for the student in a more positive way as well. So, for example, you know, what is that student's motivator for learning, and things like that. And as I said, the sharing the student voice in relation to learning, teaching, assessment, and their wider student experience is really key. I found that the classroom my workshop room goes really quiet once we start talking about the student voice, and I have some examples on the slides as well. So I'll move on to just a couple of things. I won't read all of these out, but I do ask after the workshop what you're going to change in your practice, and some of the things might be stop putting students on the spot. So we have a nice quote from a student who says, you know, don't pick on me to answer a question because I haven't had any thinking time. Embedding more inclusive practice into the module design from the outset. So rather than just it being a sticking plaster in the situation, in the classroom situation, how will you, you know, what is your inclusive practice from the beginning? And also, they've said that they'll start reflecting with colleagues. So I did a workshop with our psychology department the other week, and they've agreed to put together a small group of colleagues to focus more directly on neurodiversity in the classroom. And exploring co-construction of aspects of learning and assessment understanding as well. So it's nice to see that people are thinking about how their practice is going to change going forward. Sadly, I can't share this for colleagues who are not at the University of York because it's a Google site, but this is our toolkit. Basically, it's quite simple rather than it's not involved in it's not got reams and reams and reams of pages to trawl through. But we wanted to keep it focused on what our interns felt was completely necessary to, you know, what do the students really need to know? Sorry, the staff need to know. So that's just some of the screenshots there of the toolkit. But basically, student partnership has been really key, not just for me as a neurodivergent adult myself, but working with students. As Angharad said, we did understand each other on our level, and it helped us to develop a really rich understanding of the student experience. That's across the board in any kind of situation working with students. The lived experience really does help to actively shape and influence inclusive practice. We're working with students and not making assumptions about them. And we're creating that space for honest dialogue between colleagues as well. I'm not going to ask you to answer this question, but I just want you to reflect for yourself going forward in this session what one small change you might make in your practice after attending today. And that's it for me, so thank you for listening. I'm going to pass over to Lillian.
Thank you. So, you know, this slide on the Distractables, it's all kind of a holistic approach at the university to support staff and students who may be neurodivergent. So this is one of those it's like a social prescribing thing. Anyone can recommend anybody to come along and join this group. And it was a PhD student who started the group 5-6 years ago now, and it's still going strong. But she was very keen to share a lot of the technology she was using to help her manage, but also some tools worked better for her with neurodivergence than others. So it's become a very lovely space, and we have spoken about this in other groups where, you know, universities could do well to have a space where staff and students can talk about neurodivergence and how to cope with it, to model for students as well what it's like once they go out to work and how they can manage it at work. So there's a QR code, but equally I've put the link in the chat. So there's a toolkit on there, and there's some little, I'm very proud of our 16-page zine. It's a very tactile thing that people can go away with some tips on how to manage their neurodivergent experiences. But that's it from us. So yes, back to Julie now, I think, who is going to present on the Oxford Neurodiversity Toolkit.
Hello.
Hi, Julie.
Oh, turn my camera on. Thank you. This is going to be very brief, and it's another toolkit. It's another project in collaboration with students. I should add a disclaimer that I was not involved in the creation of this wonderful toolkit, but I found it really helpful. I wanted to share. And if you're aware of any other toolkits in your own context, please do add them to the chat. I'll paste the link in a minute, and I wanted to share a slide. Let's see if I can do that with the link to the toolkit. And so, sorry, I can't talk and do it at the same time. Bear with me.
I may have popped it into the chat now, I think.
Okay, great. I don't think I can share. Okay, never mind. So it's a toolkit that has it's called the Neurodivergent Education for Students Teaching and Learning Toolkit. It's got a number of resources, practical tips. It's got checklists that individuals can take, as well as testimonies from staff and students. And what I really liked is that for each aspect of the learning experience, there are 4 dimensions that are considered. So individual initiatives, and there are examples of those, communal efforts, institutional changes, and sector-wide transformations. And I think that both presentations that have happened today do capture this need for sort of a multi-layer approach. And I think it's great. So I hope this is useful. And I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Julie. Sorry we couldn't have a speaker directly from Oxford themselves to talk more about the actual toolkit. But if you follow that link, it does have quite a lot of lovely resources that are openly available for anyone to use. So hopefully this is of help.
And they created sorry, just jumping in, they created some lovely postcards that have little quotes and provocations, and that can be left around the campus. And these are quite nice as well. I quite like that.
That's great. Absolutely. Okay, so I think we're on to our Q&A session, and Emma has been answering questions in the chat, but I will just kind of summarize some of these for people who have not been able to, if any of us here are neurodivergent, trying to navigate between chat and listening to a speaker is going to be hard. So I'll just summarize some of the things that people have said in the chat. For Emma's session, people were loving this idea of learning about learning and helping students to come to an understanding of how their brains work and what will work for them. So applause for that. And linking in with when Tamlyn was speaking, people were very kind of affected by the fact that there needs to be more awareness of the emotional state of students when we're teaching them. So it's not just about the content we want to put on the slides, but what is the mental state and readiness of the students for learning. So that's been lovely. Steve was asking about that visualization tool. Yes, we've been popping links in the chat to, and Emma has, Emma, do you want to just quickly say about the tools you were using?
Yeah, so I have to say some of these things were built some time ago, but the visualizations, so the kind of the concrete visualization and the flow diagrams, they were built in GeoGebra, which is geometry and algebra, basically. At the time they were built, GeoGebra was not fully accessible, but they weren't built for particular students. GeoGebra is accessible now. What I'm not guaranteeing is because when I built them, that these ones are completely accessible, because we all know that it's possible to build an inaccessible thing on top of an accessible piece of software. But yes, you are able to build fully accessible GeoGebra things. The Numbas, which was the repeated questions, That's accessible. And I put the links to the accessibility information from both of those entities in the chat. Coggle, which is the mind mapping, that is more challenging. It is a mind map. It is fundamentally a non-linear thing. Coggle is chosen because it's one of the few mind mapping pieces of software where you can put maths in it. That's kind of fundamentally why Coggle. The maths itself is accessible because it's MathJax. Coggle claims the text is accessible. That's great, but where you are in the map probably is not, I imagine. So realistically, if you're providing content in that form, the content should be provided in another linear and an accessible form as well. I mean, I would say that's true with any kind of mind map situation. Yeah.
Absolutely, thank you. And for people who are wondering how you're supposed to create a mind map in a linear format, usually we recommend lists and indented lists, because even on a keyboard or for a blind student, there's a structure by which they can explore that information. So if you're scoping for a mind map tool, one that allows you to put some maths is great. Number two, something that allows you to export it into a linear format like Word or RTF would be fabulous.
If anyone can find one that does both of those things, that would be amazing. I haven't found one yet.
And the alternative, of course, that you also want is the ability to create a linear document to start with and then export that into a mind map. That's even better because you can start with a simple and then create the mind map. I know Inspiration will take Word documents and import them and transform them into a mind map, but I don't know.
No maths.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I know Inspiration well. It works really well when no maths is involved.
What happens if you've got the maths in the MathJax, like in Word in Equation Editor? Does it just blank?
Doesn't then transform into the mind map?
It just disappears. Okay. You can have a fully accessible Word document and you can transform it in many ways, and the maths usually disappears unless someone's worked out how to do that properly.
Yeah. Maybe it's coming.
Someone build it, please.
Yes, and I mean, someone's mentioned like using AI tools to create like quizzes and stuff, and sometimes things like that are built into, for instance, like Blackboard's AI tool set can kind of create a few like self-quizzing things that you can offer to students. So some of these are coming up and making things, easier for lecturers to provide these range of resources. So thanks for mentioning that, Julie. So yeah, there was chat about self-explanation training, and I think a link has been shared to the Loughborough resources?
Yeah, to be clear, that wasn't my work. That was Laura Olcott's work. It was work for mathematics students in proof. It is evidence-based, backed up by a pretty good study. It's particularly helpful to scaffold that explicit learning with the student I was working with, for instance, and others since then. I use that as a basis, but with more scaffolding and more practice.
Absolutely, thank you. And Emma in the chat is just asking about today's slides. So maybe Ron or Alistair, you can share in the chat where to get those. So yeah, and thanks everybody for sharing any links that you've had, because I think there's quite a few that I'll be going on to look up. So yeah, I think in terms of questions for Tamlyn and Angharad, I've got one for you, Tamlyn, if that's all right. Personally, knowing that you're running these workshops for staff, have you, and you were saying that psychology department are going to form a small working group to maybe ask colleagues to consider their practice, which is great. Do you have plans to kind of like follow that journey through, so that on the website, if you like, for our colleagues, you'll start to kind of be capturing examples of how people are using the learning from the workshops to do better in their practice, and then looping that round one more time, that they're seeing evidence of this improvement from student feedback, do you think?
Potentially, yeah. I'm just at the stage I'm at the moment. I'm just mapping out what the next 12 months are going to look like for the project, because we have a few different plans around evaluation, but I think that's quite key actually. Around the evaluation is to see what we could actually still add to the toolkit about what other colleagues are doing, because it's not been a huge focus. I've been managing to do the workshops, but because we've been working on our other project, as you know, no gaps. We've not really had a spotlight on that, but we're gonna, yeah, I will bring that in, I think.
And I think I noted one of the things that students recommended as well, or the toolkit recommends, is the use of something like a Mentimeter, which is like a polling tool, and collaborative documents in the class to allow contributions in like multiple formats. And I don't know, Angharad, if you want to say something about how that helps with interactions in a kind of learning environment.
Yeah, so something that came up a lot in the workshops, when Tamlyn and I kind of ran the workshops together, was staff would be kind of frustrated that they weren't getting a lot of engagement from students. But then we would kind of meet that at the student perspective with lots of neurodivergent students will feel very kind of stressed in a classroom environment if they think they might get picked on in a class, if they might have to, speak when they weren't ready or didn't have enough thinking time. And so Mentimeter allows students to be able to contribute their thoughts through typing and not having to kind of speak in front of the whole class, and also when they've had enough thinking time. And it can also be anonymized, which is also really good. And it still allows that kind of engagement with the lecturer, but it's kind of less put on the spot and pressured. And as Tamlyn was saying, kind of emotions for neurodivergent students and for all students are really important when learning. If you're kind of stressed and panicked, you're not going to take in the information well, and you're not going to be able to give kind of good thought out contribution. And so, yeah, we were really kind of pushing the use of Mentimeter. And then group kind of collaborative documents are also really useful for group projects that often neurodivergent students might find quite stressful to contribute, or to know when they can say something in a group environment, especially if they don't know the group very well. And so lecturers and teachers kind of pushing the use of Google Docs, where people can work in one document collaboratively together at the same time, is really useful, so that neurodivergent students don't have to kind of navigate the added social intricacies of group projects.
Thank you. That's fabulous. So I think that was the summary of the chat.
I've got a question that I'd be really interested in hearing the answers, and it could be from Tamlyn, Angharad, or Emma, because I think you'll all have experience of this and views on this. But one of the things that comes across very, very clearly is that sense of the importance of emotion and anxiety in learning and controlling those, managing those. Now, I'm also aware that a key function of university is kind of that transition to work and to independence, and so developing resilience is also critical to do, and developing resilience is often built on the basis of I've got confidence that I'm not stupid because I know how to do this. I just need particular things in place. So my question really is, to what extent was resilience training an explicit and embedded part of your work, whichever area you work in, or to what extent is it almost an implicit byproduct of helping build that sense of self-confidence?
Who wants to go? We didn't, well, I can answer that one. We didn't touch upon resilience training. I have a problem with the word resilience. I think it's a difficult one to pin down for students. I think particularly the students that we're getting through these days, I can't speak for all of them, but I can speak for a few voices where they are much more aware of their limits, and they will not push themselves. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean, they just know their limits and they know when to rest. And I think that's really key. So I think, but when you're talking about resilience in the sense of just keep going until you've got it, I think that's quite hard for a neurodivergent person to what's the word? I'm trying to think of the word. It's a consistency issue, isn't it? Resilience. It's like I can be resilient one day, but tomorrow I might fall apart just because somebody says the wrong thing to me. And that's where the disability lies really with neurodivergency. It's, you know, it's being able to turn up one day and everything go absolutely fine, but the next day you could completely crash. And just because you're burnt out. I mean, Angharad, you might be able to put this in a more coherent form than I can right at the moment, but I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have kind of an instant reaction to the word resilience. I think, especially for autistic students, I was talking about this the other day, in within biology, but kind of lots of disabled students within higher education won't kind of ask for help, or will ask for help once they are already struggling too much. And so lecturers kind of won't know that there is an issue until it's kind of too late and more interventions need to be put in place. And I think resilience to an autistic person, if you kind of say, I'll keep trying until you get it, it then means to them that they won't ask for help, or they'll think that there is no support available there, that it's kind of like, you know, you have to be resilient, you have to keep trying, even if you don't necessarily have the tools to get there yourself. Like it's kind of, I think reframing resilience around it is okay to ask for help. Like part of resilience is asking for help and getting that support. Um, and I think, you know, doing this project and meeting neurodivergent adults, it also showed to me that I don't have to change the way in which I work, or neurodivergent students shouldn't be told to change the way in which you work. Because going into the workplace, you know, the workplace is changing. There are more accommodations available for people in the workplace. And I saw lots of ways in which neurodivergent adults were kind of making their career work for them, you know, with home working or different kinds of accommodations. And so I think it's important for students to be kind of independent learners, but also I think it's important for students to learn how to request accommodations, because it's not that in university, you know, you can access more accommodations. In the workplace, there are none. I think in some ways you can access kind of more support and accommodations in the workplace. And I think maybe part of resilience for neurodivergent and autistic students is learning how to advocate for themselves and how to accommodate themselves and request accommodations.
Okay, thank you for that. I was very interested in the word metacognition, because obviously semantics come into this. What does one person mean by resilience or another? Emma, you talked about metacognition quite a lot, and that is a different kind of resilience, because that's somebody.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
So actually, when you say the word resilience, I know there's the wider resilience, but I am working very specifically around maths and stats. And there is an idea of mathematical resilience, which is something that we actually provide access to the mathematics resilience scale to all of our maths students on kind of the page that we have for the maths students. And so the students that I'm working with, they might be working with other people around perhaps that wider question. So that's not really my domain, but mathematical resilience and its connection with mathematical anxiety is something that is there all the time in what I'm doing, but we're very much focused on that. And that is a problem for all students of higher mathematics. So all students have a collapse of their confidence and mathematical resilience, particularly maths students entering first year maths during the transition from A level, just because maths changes so much. And so all students experience that. It's just, it might be differentially experienced by the students I'm working with. And it can have a much greater impact on their well-being when that happens. And so it's more important to kind of surface that and work around that and what we mean by mathematical resilience. And it absolutely includes talking to people and getting help, because that's also how we learn in maths. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to expand a little bit on, not on the word resilience, but we talk about low energy and high energy days as a Distractables group quite a lot. And we try and talk about when you have when you're having a good day, a high focus day, a high energy day, actually bother to plan for when you have low energy and low cognitive load days, so that you can still feel like you're making progress in your coursework or in your work, on those days when you recognize, I really can't cope with finishing this assignment right now, but let me look at this page that tells myself what little thing I can do towards that, you know. So yeah, it's having those strategies, I think, that's not obvious to everybody. I think I've got to this ripe old age before I've learned some of these coping strategies. So we can't expect our young people to come to uni and suddenly be equipped with any of it. And I know a lot of our students are overwhelmed by the sheer amount of digital communications they get at university. That's something we don't talk about. We talk about the teaching and learning aspect, but on top of the teaching and learning aspect, they're getting emails from the student union, the university about all kinds of events, their colleges, accommodation. And if they're disabled students, they get multiple emails from all their assistive technology trainers, study coaches. It's a constant stream. So actually our disabled students have even more to cope with than your average student. They almost get double the emails, which is ironic and really, really tough.
In a sense, that's what I was kind of hinting at in terms of the phrase resilience training, helping people work out what are the strategies, because I think if you talk to 10 neurodiverse people, they would have 10 different strategies. But what you might also find is that 3 of the strategies that this person uses would actually be brilliant for this other person as well. And it's how we might surface some of those things so that it's not just about I need people to do these things for me, but also, well, actually I've got all sorts of things that I've kind of learned and picked up from people myself as well.
Yeah. So 3 minutes to go. I just wanted to highlight some of the things coming up. We do have our next session, and we do have a kind of, it's called early bird signups, but actually, where we have our sessions ahead of time, we do advertise it on our page, so that you can just click to sign up for our May session, which is about teaching digital accessibility to others. Anyone who's into maths, we've got another session there that talks about teaching digital accessibility to maths or STEM lecturers, because there are very particular challenges with maths accessibility. And then another great conference that is annual, which if anybody here has any thoughts about digital accessibility and would like to submit a proposal, the DIGAC conference is on the 24th of June. I'm trying to type and speak at the same time. We agreed that I can't do this, right? So 24th of June. Managed it somehow. So I've typed 24th of June twice. There you go. And it's a wonderful conference. And again, we're hoping to get like a math specific stream, because again, it's in some disciplines, there are specific things and ways of working with accessibility that's slightly unique. And I think if there's anything to be said, I think maybe each discipline, considering if there are specifically different and difficult things in their discipline for disabled students in different ways, it is useful to do it in a kind of subject specific way, I think, sometimes. Silom, thank you. I don't know if you want to come on and say something, but I tell you what I'll do. I will stop the recording and then we can carry on having an open chat.